Why are teddy bears never hungry? Because they're always stuffed. That was pretty bad, wasn't it? Yes. Dad joke for the win. What's up, dude?
What's up, man?
How are
I appreciate you having me here.
Yeah.
So, what do you call a belt made of watches?
Ooh, that's a good one. I have no idea.
A waste of time.
I like it. That's a really good one. You're the first person to throw one back at me.
Oh man,
I appreciate
I've got
that.
them all in my. That was the best part about becoming a father, was having justification to tell dad jokes.
Yeah. Well, you know,
That's what you live for.
that's it. You only have kids to be able to tell the jokes, right?
That's right.
Jeez. Obviously.
Or you.
How old are your kids? How old you have one? How many kids do you have?
I have two. I've got a son who is going to be 3 years
A little
old.
closer. There you go.
Son is going to be 3 years old this month.
Okay.
Daughter who's going to be 11 next month.
Oh man,
Yeah.
you're running the gamut.
Yeah, she's great. She's a built-in babysitter.
Yeah,
Really
well, you know,
helping.
we just announced publicly that my wife is pregnant, so we're expecting we're due June 1st, and our oldest will be 10 at the time, and actually not even quite 10. She'll be 10 in July, so a month later she'll be 10.
Okay.
So I keep joking around. I'm like, hey, my new baby's going to be raised by a 10-year-old. So,
Right. Well,
but yeah, so you have that same separation between 2 and 11. There's a big
Right.
gap there.
Right.
We'll get into it. But real quick, let me introduce you. Guys,
Yeah.
This is Phillip. How do you pronounce your last name?
Searcy.
Searcy. Okay, I didn't want to mispronounce it. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Appreciate
Tell everyone a little bit, like 2 seconds about who you are, what you do, and then we'll kind of get into some of that stuff.
Yeah, so I am a licensed clinical social worker, which means that I am licensed with the state. I've got my master's in social work. From there, went on to do, provisional work, things of that sort, and working under a supervisor. Now I'm licensed with the state, which means I can accept insurance, things of that sort. But I've been in the mental health field, over 10 years now, and I love it. I recently last year, June of last year, so I guess about a year and a half, opened up my own practice across the street from you.
Yeah.
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 So we're outpatient mental health. We got 5 therapists and see anybody from 5 years old and up.
Very cool. What's the name of that?
Therapy group.
Therapy group for anybody in the Hilton Head, Bluffton, South Carolina area.
Moss Creek Village.
That's it.
Yeah.
Cool. So anyways, that qualifies Phillip as to why he's here and why we're talking to him. But let's get back on track. So you got 2 kids, 2 and 11.
Yep.
Let's get into that for a minute because there's so many places we can go.
There really are, because, in disclosure, we're a blended family.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
So
okay.
I share custody of my 11-year-old daughter, or almost 11-year-old. Don't want to jump the gun too soon.
Yeah.
With my ex, who lives on Hilton Head. That's what brought me and my wife here 4.5 years ago.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to people that are in that field and understand the psychology behind like so many things that go on and how you see the world. Because I feel like people like you see the world slightly differently than most other people. That like you see people misbehaving, you see children misbehaving, you see adults acting like lunatics, and you like are trying to diagnose these things like all day long. Like in your mind, in the back of your head, you're like, oh, this person has this, like they had daddy issues, or I don't know, whatever it is.
Right. Well, and that's interesting because that's what a lot of people think. I mean, most people that I meet the first time, they're like, are you analyzing me? What are you thinking? And I have to tell them, like, I don't do that because it would drive me crazy. If I was trying to analyze every single person, it would drive me crazy. And so I've had to learn how to very quickly decipher, is this something worth my time? Is this something worth my mental energy?
Right.
Is this something that I have any control over doing anything about?
I wish I could turn that off, because being a mechanic for so long in my life, like I'm diagnosing every car on the road. I drive by, it's making a funny noise. I'm like, oh, that thing needs ball joints. Oh, that needs a wheel bearing. That thing's out of alignment. The rear end shifted. Something's out of whack. Like I hear a funny noise. I'm like, dang, the lifters in that motor are smoked. Whatever the case is. And I'm like constantly like diagnosing every car that I see, everything I hear all the time. I wish I could turn that off.
Well, so I guess let me clarify. I do it, but I think because of my training, I'm able, just like you with cars, you don't have to stress about it because your brain can go exactly to, is this
Right. You're not over analyzing.
Right.
You just know.
right? That's kind of the same for me. If I see somebody acting a certain way, I pretty quickly in my head can have at least, 3 good valid options of why they may be this way, right? Why they're acting very rude, why they're being this or this. And so that's where I think I can say, all right, it's not worth my time.
So yeah, I get that.
Like for you, if the brakes start squeaking a little bit, it doesn't make you freak out that you got to go change them today.
Right. Yeah, I'm just like, that needs to be dealt with.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's super interesting. So, what are some of the common cases you see? Like, there's things I want to ask you, and I know that you don't deal with a lot of like really young kids. You have a specialist there that does with like 5 and up.
Mm-hmm.
You deal with like teenagers, 13 and up.
Yep.
I think that's where I want to go. I think initially is like some of the problematic behavior with children.
Mm-hmm.
What some of our listeners can expect as we, like myself, have a 9, almost 10-year-old, like we're in that preteen stage where we're dealing with certain types of behavior. And you might have knowledge of like some of the things like kids that won't sleep in their own bed and things like that. And like, is there better ways to handle types of things with children and kids that are misbehaving, and how you reprimand them or discipline them, or like people that do this are just going backwards? Like, this is a really bad idea that has, whatever. I don't know. And I'm curious to hear your kind of viewpoint, or if there's common cases that you see that parents are bringing in children that are doing certain things that you're like,
Right.
This is a problem in the world that needs to be corrected at a much higher level. And that's been like bad behavior built into parents because someone said it was okay once. Like, I don't know.
No. I completely follow. I guess to clarify, I don't specifically work with young children only because I used to, and I realized that a big piece was the parents needed some work.
Right. Okay.
The kids would go back home and they'd just undo everything that you've been working on. So I'm like, okay, well, let's go to the source of the problem, which is generally the adult, because kids aren't going to just instinctively, unless there's some genetic, thing, just going to be horrible people. Right. So
it's like learned behavior.
Yeah. And that comes down to that nature versus nurture.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So nature being genetically what you got from your mom and dad, whether you knew your mom and dad or not, eye color, hair color, height, all the way down to mental health. There's science to show that connection. But to me, nurture and how we're raised is the biggest thing that influences our belief systems. What we think about ourselves, what we think about other people, how we view situations. And so I, in working with adults, obviously work with people talking about kids. So I guess the long route to get to your answer is the biggest struggle that I see with parenting is the balance between instilling the morals and ethics of your house and letting your kid be who they are. Right.
And a lot of that, really, like you said, stems down to the parents. So I guess the second part of my question is like, how, there are certain ways to deal with things. Like my kids, for example, let's bring some of my situations to the table and see where it goes. One is my kids, and it's probably any kid, like you give them an inch, they take a mile. Right. So like right now we're dealing with like just ridiculousness between homeschooling with the kids, virtual learning. It's a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
To my wife being pregnant, first trimester, she has zero energy. She's like, can't get out of bed. And then I'm getting the kids ready. They're on virtual learning at school. I leave the house. She's still like just trying to make it through life. And the kids are goofing around on their iPad. She's not visually watching them because she's like throwing up in the bathroom or whatever. I'm here. And then she get a message from the teacher. It's like, your child's being distracting on virtual learning. It's like, Jesus Christ.
Right.
So it's just like it runs the gamut of issues. But I guess correcting maybe even some of that behavior, right? You give them an inch, they take a mile. How do you kind of reel it back in correctly without just like karate chop them and being like, you don't do this.
Right. How many times do I have to tell you?
Yeah. I mean, like, what are some of the characteristics of like good parenting versus bad parenting, or things that are just like, as much as you want to do this, don't do this, or things that commonalities, I guess is what I'm looking for.
Yes. Yeah. And so one thing that I would like to correct is so many times people come in and not bashing you, but that good parenting, bad parenting. To me, let's take that out. It's not about good, bad, right, wrong, because that's all relative on who you ask, right?
I get it. Yeah.
Like here in America, do you let your 3-year-old sleep in the same bed with you? No, it's kind of frowned upon. But if you're in a village in Africa, you're going to. So some animal doesn't take your baby in the middle of the night, right?
Yeah.
So it's all relative.
Yeah.
And so what it comes down to is, I guess the simplest way to put it is boundaries. Boundaries and discussing expectations. Because the line between expectation and reality, that's where anger lies. That's where frustration.
I like this. Okay,
born.
We're getting deep here.
Right.
This is good stuff. Yeah.
Anything from as simple as like when I leave here, I expect to be back to my office in 5 minutes. But if I get in a fender bender, I'm pissed. Right. If I expect to come home and my wife has got dinner ready and she doesn't, my initial, expectation, reality, now I'm frustrated. Right. I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to parenting. We expect our kids to do what they're told. And we forget that they're kids, that they're distracted.
That's true. I know plenty of people that have expectations of their kids, even very young age, to be disciplined enough for something, or potty trained by a certain age. And they try to, I feel like there's a lot of like unrealistic expectations that then causes that anger and frustration and, or there's something wrong with my kid or anything. I'm like, well, no, they're 3. They're going to freak out and have a temper tantrum.
Right.
It's a 3-year-old. That's 100% normal.
Right.
So like, there's nothing wrong with your child.
And we do that. We don't allow ourselves to really accept the season that we're in with our kids. The best advice my dad gave me, when I had my daughter, was embrace and enjoy every moment, right? Because so many parents are like, man, I wish that they were still babies and I could hold them and they would cuddle. And I wish that they were still, in middle school where they'd want to watch a movie with us, but now they're in high school. It's like he said, every moment is going to have its pros and cons, but you have to live in that. And so that's what I tried to do, but it's still hard. And I connect it sometimes with when I was in grad school. I was living with a guy who had 2 bull mastiffs. They're puppies, still over 100 pounds. Thought that they were lap dogs.
Yeah.
When you look at them, you see this massive animal who you assume, because it's so big, must be more mature than it is, must be more, well behaved. But then you sit on the couch and it's like, it's a puppy, right? Yeah. So I think we do that with kids sometimes, that we have these expectations, maybe holding a bar too high for them. But then I think internally, and this is where I think everybody could benefit from therapy, is really starting to look at what are your insecurities? Because a lot of parenting comes from, I don't want to be shamed by my friends because my kid is acting up, right? It's that typical parent saying, your behaviors directly are reflected on me.
Yeah. You're making me look bad.
Right.
Yeah.
So
why is there such a stigma around therapy and stuff? Like, I feel like that's a big deal. There's a lot of people that I think frown upon it, myself included. I'm like, gee, you need therapy? Like, man, you're really screwed up. Like, I've had those thoughts.
And
like,
you're the reason. You're just what you said.
Right? I know.
Yeah. But it's funny because, and I tell everybody that comes in my office the first time, I'm like, therapy's weird. It is. Let's just get that out in the open. I'm a random person. You've never met me. A lot of times I'm younger than them. And I'm going to ask you the most personal questions that you've never told anybody. I mean, literally this week, a guy told me something. He's in his 50s that he's never told anybody. That's the kind of stuff that we don't get to do that anywhere else in life. we have friends, family, loved ones, people who've known us for a long time, and we can go to them and we can get support, but they're all emotionally invested. You know, your wife, your friends, they're going to give you advice based on what makes them feel good. Let's be honest.
Right.
Right. Your wife doesn't want you to, go shoot guns and drink alcohol at the same time. Right. It's like, okay,
that sounds boring.
Right. But does it mean it's bad? No, but we're listening, but it's this idea that I don't know. I'm trying to figure out the most eloquent way of saying it. But I mean, you catch my drift. Right?
Yeah, for sure. It's just so trying to break that stigma of therapy. I've never felt the need for any type of therapy. Like, I don't feel like I have any like underlying issues. I don't have any, parenting situations that I'm like, I wish that never happened to me, or any life experiences that I felt were like negative impacts on my mental health, or like, no, I have none of that. So
right.
I don't really like sympathize or empathize with people who need therapy because of a certain thing. So I have a hard time relating to that. Like, I just don't feel like I feel awesome all the time, and I'm super positive, and so
and a lot of that comes down to personality too. I've worked with a lot of folks who've had, upbringings just like yours, where there's nothing traumatic, no issues in their family, no big major crisis, deaths, loss of loved ones, but they still just have something in their personality that makes them more of that people pleaser, more of that workaholic, more of that, kind of functioning, but maybe not really 100% sure, to the core who they are, right? And that sometimes is just genetically a piece, but it doesn't mean that everybody needs therapy or wants therapy, but they may have a moment in life where they would, right? So, somebody never gone to therapy before, some drastic event, some death of a loved one, some car accident, something traumatic may bring them there. But overall, it's a place where you can come and you can talk and you can find a place in your mind where it actually feels safe to open up.
And sometimes, and I've experienced this before, actually, even the other day. This is really funny. I had some stuff going on. It was like super stressful, and there's certain things about it that I can't talk about to some of the people around. So I was with my business partner, and I like vented to him about it. I was like, you won't believe this, but I can't say that like somewhere else.
Right.
So after the fact, I like hung out, we just BS'd, and I was telling him about some stuff going on, and like we hung out, drank a beer. And then later I was like, thanks for the therapy session. But it's funny because like some of it is just venting and getting it off your chest. Like, that can reduce that stress level, that like, oh, okay, got it out of me.
Exactly. No, right? and I'm so glad you said that, because I believe that 80% of therapy is the relationship, right? If you come into my office and you don't trust me, you don't feel like you can open up, you don't feel like you can be honest, it doesn't matter if I'm any good or not. We're not going to get anywhere. Mm-hmm. So that relationship is what allowed you to feel comfortable venting, right?
I mean, half the time that's what people are doing to you, right? They're just venting, and you're just ears. You're just like here to listen.
Right, because there is some truth to sometimes we've got the answers. We just have to talk long enough until we find them. Mm-hmm. Right. Because sometimes it's like when you practice a speech for school and the first time you say it out loud, you're like, oh, that did not sound like
awkward.
Right. Yeah. And so that's the beauty of therapy, is you actually come in and say the stuff that goes through your head that you never tell anybody else.
Right.
And
you say it out loud.
And you hear your own voice through your own ears, and it registers different.
Right. Yeah. It's really interesting. Sometimes you do have your own answers. You just have to be able to like say things out loud or find the answer for yourself.
Yep.
And as soon as, like, I've done that plenty of times. You're like, never mind. I know. Now I know. Whatever it is. Yeah. Super interesting. You deal with a lot of, do you deal with any like marriage, relationship type stuff as well?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think, and I ask that because I know that a lot of issues with children stem from it's all communication, right? When you're talking about therapy between people, it's a communication thing. Whatever the expectation is, you have to communicate that to the other person. This is what I'm expecting of you.
Bingo.
Maybe the reality of that falls short and you have that frustration or whatever, but I feel like oftentimes you have an expectation that they're unaware of. And that's happened to me and my wife before, even. Like, nothing that's caused like any major things, but like we haven't discussed maybe our weekend plans. Right. I am expecting to be able to go do something and I'm not aware of any other particular plans that might be going on or things we have to do. And I'm like, ooh, I'm going to come to the office. I'm going to get the NSX. I'm going to go cruise around, maybe go to the range and shoot some guns or whatever. I don't know, whatever. Right. I have some big expectations in my head. There's no plans on Saturday and I'm going to go do this. I don't know, whatever it is.
Then she's got a baby shower to go to.
Right. and or she's like, oh, we're going to go do this thing or do this or do that. I'm like, well,
right.
And then I'm frustrated. And that's a make-believe scenario, but like still, but like that's a reality.
It's real.
Like that could happen.
Right.
And I think so that is like things like that have happened to me and her multiple times over the years. And I told her, I said, the problem we keep running into is we don't understand each other's expectations for this weekend.
What do you mean you can't read her mind?
Oh, I try as much as I try, but it's just setting that expectation, having that like Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday conversation of like, hey, this weekend, like what's going on? Cause I kind of want to do this thing. Like my buddies are going shooting and they want me to, I kind of want to go. I haven't been in a few months, you know, are you cool with that? Versus just like Saturday morning, like, hey, what's up? I'm going to go shooting. And she's like, no, you're not. We're doing this other thing. Well, I didn't know about that. You didn't tell me. Like communication.
It's the communication breakdown. It's the lost in translation. But more often than not, the issues that a couple is dealing with in their marriage did not get created in that marriage. Following? So it's baggage from the previous relationship, previous marriage, the way they were parented.
I talk about this a lot.
Right. Well, I mean, I had a couple come in, you know, the guy came from this family where his parents would disagree, but they would go into their bedroom, close the door and whisper fight. Right. He never saw conflict. So to him, a marriage is no conflict. Marries a woman who's, you know, very Italian background. Everybody fights over dinner and then you eat and you make up by dessert. Right. And so to her, she's like always, you know, get it all out. Let's get it all out. And to him, he's like, this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Right. But conflict it's going to happen. You're two different people with two different backgrounds, two different beliefs. I mean, that's why reality TV blew up, right? You throw a bunch of people in a house and say, let's watch. Right. And that's what a marriage is.
It's funny because I never saw my parents fight or argue or bicker ever. I mean, never, even still, except for 2 times. And those 2 times stand out in my head. And I remember being like borderline traumatized. And it wasn't even a big deal.
Right.
It was like something minor, but it was like, Travis, wouldn't you agree? You ever see mom and dad fight? Never.
Right.
It's weird. It would be really weird.
I remember 2 particular times that like something kind of like, that's like an everyday occurrence in my house of like some disagreement about something. But those 2 particular times stand out so crazy to me. And so that's super interesting.
Well, it's interesting to me because that's most people's story walking on their parents having sex.
Ugh.
Right? Because I mean, think about it. It's the exact same thing, but just different. You never see your parents having sex. So seeing it is like, whoa, right? Not seeing your parents fight and then seeing it is still like that. You know, it's uncomfortable. It's something's off.
It's kind of the same, but a lot different.
Same in depends. But I think the same in how it gets registered in your brain.
Sure.
Right. Same how it's going to follow you through life.
I get it.
Now, doesn't mean you're going to be like never can function as a human being because of that. But it's those little things that build those belief systems, right? So for whatever reason, because you didn't see it, you know, how did your brain process conflict?
Right. When you talked about the way people were raised and how they carry that through their lives and all that kind of stuff, and what some people's sense of normal is one of our big sort of missions, let's call it, is outwardly and publicly showing what we think good parenting looks like. Because, and I think you'll agree,
Effective parenting,
whatever, I like that. That's good. There are people who go through life being parented a certain way that think that's normal, that the rest of the world thinks is unacceptable, and they think that's normal. So they go on to be that same parent the way they were parented, which again is unacceptable or less than good or less than effective.
Right. Yeah.
But then, so it's like we're trying to shed light on certain things and show like this is what we think good effective parenting looks like, because we've had people be like, like, listen, I feel like I tell the story in every podcast, so I'm sorry if you've heard this before.
Probably.
But you haven't heard it, I don't think, the story, but like we had a particular guest that was talking about who's actually the one who told us this is what we were doing. He's like, the only reason I'm here is because you are setting a new standard publicly of like what good parenting looks like. He's like, as a child, I was raised in a trailer where my mom was growing weed in the trailer. Cops were kicking in the doors once a week. My bedroom closet was full of weed. Like, I thought that was normal. I didn't know houses didn't have wheels till I was like 11. So he grows up and goes through it. He's an incredible person now. He's done great things. But he's like, I thought that was normal. So who knows where his life would have been had he not joined the military and some other stuff go on. But it was like, damn, he's right. There's people out there who like had a really shitty childhood, or their dad wasn't around at all. They were raised by their mom because their dad was in prison and all this stuff. And that's normal to them. So they're the mom had a boyfriend who abused the mom and beat the shit out of her and all this stuff. So he marries a woman, beats the shit out of her, and thinks it's okay because the boyfriend beat the shit out of his mom because his dad was in prison and his dad wasn't around, so no one told him no. And like, go on down the list. And this is where it all stems from. Am I wrong?
No. And it becomes a generational gap. And going back to answer a question that we missed over, or I missed over, was that answer to the stigma of mental health is exactly that. It used to be everything stays within the house. Right, a man's house is his own business. Right, it used to be you don't go in if he's beating his wife or his kids. Right, it's like it's his house. But now with research, we're seeing how that didn't work so well. And so the stigma of mental health is that we've never done it. School systems don't talk about mental health, and if they do, it's a psychology class about Sigmund Freud, right? Some history. But we learn everything else there is to learn in life except for our emotions and our thoughts and how that can propel you through life or hold you back. And when it comes to parenting now, it's okay. All right. The best advice to give to parents on effective parenting is do what works for your family.
And you have to try different things to figure that out, right?
Right. Because, everybody's going to have an opinion, right? But it's like somebody told me, opinions are like buttholes. Everybody's got one, and most of them stink. Right. And that's the thing where
I've never heard the most of them stink part. I've never heard that. I like that addition. That's a good one.
And so, it's listen to your heart, listen to your gut, but do the soul searching to figure out, what is it about how you were raised that makes you want to do something different? What is it about how you were raised that makes you want to do something the same? And do it because you want to, not because you were conditioned to. Right? We're conditioned to be, because parenting,
fucking hard.
It's brainwashing though, right? Because if I was born into a Muslim family, maybe I'd be Muslim. I don't know. But our parents are doing the best that they can. We got to give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, the other piece.
Yeah, you inherit your parents' kind of ideas and beliefs.
Yeah. And you've got to do your own searching. And some people don't. They dive themselves into
it takes a long time that you get later in life before you realize you can do your own searching. A lot of people don't, you know what I mean? You grow up a Christian, or you grow up Jewish, or you grow whatever it is. And then you're still like, that's not really enough for me. But you become 20 plus years old before you realize you can start to think for yourself like that.
Exactly. And that, and they say now 30 is the new 21. It's taken people a lot longer. because I think there's so many distractions now, so much more to distract us from ourselves, and we want it, but it's toxic at the same time without moderation. But that's anything in life, but still it's this thing of saying, okay, I'm a parent. What do I want? What is the core? Most parents would say, I want my kids to be a functioning part of society, right? But we sweat the small stuff. We sweat that they only want to wear 2 pairs of clothes, right? That they don't make their room, that their socks stink, that they leave their shoes at the bottom of the steps, right? We sweat all this small stuff that is robbing us of joy of the bigger picture, right? So that's kind of the thing of like, okay, you got to do what works for you, but it all comes down to, understand your expectations, let your kids know your expectations.
Well, I let my kids know my expectations yesterday. Let me tell you a story. So my wife, being pregnant and not being quite so functional right now, the kids have like wrecked their rooms. I mean, wrecked, like embarrassing. Like I wouldn't even post a picture of how bad it is because people would judge me. Like wrecked. You guys know, So I go in there the other day after they had wrecked their rooms. I'm like, what in the world is going on in here? How did I left this morning, everything's great. I just got home. What happened in these bedrooms? Right. The hallway, the everything. So that day, I'm like, you guys need to clean your rooms. Oh, I didn't do it. I'm like, yes, you did, And we've got Nest cameras throughout the house. I'm like, do I need to look on the cameras? Right. I'm like, I got this. Right. So a couple of days of being down their throats with, you guys need to clean your rooms. I'm not doing it. I do it. We're constantly holding their hand through cleaning their rooms. You guys know exactly where your things go. You made this mess. You're going to clean it up. Mm-hmm. And they fight tooth and nail. So Monday morning, Sunday night, I typed up a thing on my computer, make sure it was very legible, typed out, printed so they could read it. And I made my oldest one read it. I was straight up Cameron and Kendall, I expect you to clean your rooms, your bedrooms, the bathroom, and the hallway before I get home from the gym. 5:45 p.m., anything that's left out will be thrown away. I don't waste your time today. Love you, Dad.
How'd it work?
Okay. But here's where I screwed up. And then I made them both sign it. So because a lot of times, and I was trying to set the expectation and then hold them to it, because a lot of times well, you didn't say that, or you didn't, well, I'm and I was like, you guys both understand exactly what this says, right? If you understand, I want you to write your name here. Mm-hmm. So I was like, here's my little bedroom contract. Here we go. Well, I get home what's today? Tuesday? Yeah, it was last night. I get home. They had picked up their rooms. Pretty clean, not awful. There were still a few things out. And I said, listen, I'm going to give you till after dinner. Anything that's, left out, I'm going to throw away. And so they pushed it off to the side. They made a little bit of effort, but I was in full work mode. So then I didn't follow through with my end of the deal. So I kind of screwed up. So then I was like, listen, I know you guys think your rooms are clean. Here's what I see wrong with them. I want you to fix it before I get home tonight. I'm giving you an extra day here. Mm-hmm. And
very generous.
And then it's all going. Anything that's outside of the criteria I just set for you, it's gone. So we'll see how it goes. Yep. But I tried to set that expectation.
And that's what you have to do, because they're kids, they're distracted. And in the world that we live in, there's so many distractions, and we have to understand that. And I think, we get caught up in this idea that we have to be perfect parents. Right? It's I screwed up. I didn't follow up because I was working. But the best thing we can do for our kids is really 2 things: teaching them that it's okay if not everybody likes them, and letting them see that we're not perfect. Taking ownership of that, apologizing for that, expressing how you feel about that, what you're doing to make it better, right? That's what life is about, because we're not really defined by what we do, but what we do after that, right? If I get in trouble, if I've made a mistake, right? What's going to define me is how I learn from that and I adapt, because it's taking something that's going on in life and learning from it, growing in wisdom. That's what we want our kids to be able to do. So you were able to come to them and say, yep, look, I messed up and didn't follow up with you, but that worked out for you because now you get a little more time, right? I mean, that could happen in the workplace. You know, the boss is supposed to call you in for a meeting, but
He's busy.
busy, something happens, and now you just get this bonus time. You're like, oh, yes.
Yeah, right.
Right. I didn't sleep last night, but okay.
Yeah. And speaking of distractions, let's go down this rabbit hole with the current situation of kids in school, virtual learning, all that kind of stuff. You've had to do virtual stuff even with clients. What's your take on that kind of stuff in society right now? With everything is happening through Zoom, there's like a human interaction disconnect. It's all digital and virtual. How do you think that impacts things?
I mean, to
For
me,
adults and children, not
right?
just-
No, you're right. I mean, to me, it's just like everything in life, pros and cons, right? For me, right? Do I love seeing people in a computer? I mean, I had to go get blue blocking glasses because my eyes were getting so dry. But I was very thankful to be able to still work.
Right.
Right. I'm thankful that kids can still learn something, even if it's 15% of what they may have learned without a pandemic. It's still something. So I'm really thankful for technology. But I think the tough part is that we've taught kids that technology is for fun. Right? Technology is TV. It's video games. It's something to entertain me. And now I'm sitting here looking at a teacher lecture and I'm supposed to like it.
Interesting.
So I think it's just so foreign to
It's a new, I mean, it's a
Right.
complete learning curve for
everybody.
the entire world. I mean, yes, there are some online school has been a uptrend over the last handful of years, and that's been, an increasing thing. And I know a girl who was teaching English to Chinese students virtually, over the last few years.
English as a second language, or
one of those types of programs. So that, I know that there's kids that do that stuff, and a lot of that is elective. Like they opt into that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. People choose to do that, right? I'm choosing because I've got social anxiety to do online school, or I'm choosing to
because I want to learn something I can't learn in
Exactly.
person here because it's something that offers whatever.
Right. But the 90% of other people who would not choose that are forced to now.
Yeah, I would do terribly. I was a poor student to begin with, let alone doing it virtually on a computer and be like, sorry, I couldn't log in. So I just rode my bike all day.
Right.
Like that would be me. I'd be like,
Dog chewed my power cord.
Yeah,
right.
Zoom kicked me off, so my car's way faster now. Like that would have been me. I'd like fail everything. So my daughter, same thing. She's like that. We had a parent teacher conference the other day, and she's failing some of these classes. And this is a whole nother disconnect where there's lack of expectations that are communicated properly. And it's like she's failing because she's not turning these assignments in, or she seems distracted or whatever. So then we confront her and we're like, hey, your grade in math sucks. Like it's a 65, like she's saying you're not turning in your work. What's up with that? She's like, I'm turned it all in. I'm like, she's not. She said you're not. She's like, I'm like, like where are these assignments? She's like, I've turned them in. I did this. And I'm like, well, where's I want to see the list of these things, She's like, well, we did those. Like now they're back into like 2 days in school in person and 3 days virtual. She's like, well, we did those in person in school on Monday. So of course I didn't turn it in on my iPad because we did it in class. So I'm like, oh, Jesus, really?
Right.
So now the teacher's like, she's not turning in her assignments. Meanwhile, she's saying she turned it in person because she was actually in class. It's a mess. And then I'm like, where's the parent portal with all this crap that I can see? She's like, well, she knows what she's supposed to be doing. I'm like, I don't know what she's supposed to be doing. How about let the fucking parents know what's going on so I can hold her accountable? When she says, yep, all my work's done, I can go back and check that without having to like figure out how to navigate all her into 13 different apps on a computer to figure it out. Like there should be a parent portal for this thing that's like, here's your child's assignments. Maybe that exists. I don't know about it. And it's crazy. But it's
so
the lack of communication.
It is, right.
And then the teacher, what really actually sort of pissed me off, and she might be watching this because she knows who we are, so I'm sorry. But it was like, these are the things your student's doing poorly and she needs to improve on. Do you have any questions? Okay, see you next time. I was like, was she doing good at anything?
Right. And that's a really interesting thought that feeds into what we were talking about with the parenting. One common theme that I see this in relationships, period, but a lot with kids and parenting is I think we expect things in life to go well, right? We expect things to not get in our way. We expect everybody to listen to us and for life to just beautifully fall in place. And when it doesn't, we feel it's our job to point it out, right? And especially as parents, is this a teachable moment, right? But I think what happens is so many times we're going to come in and we're going to say, hey, your room's not clean, pick it up, right? Hey, what are you doing? You didn't put your dishes up, right? Oh, hey, you're supposed to take the trash, right? It's Tuesday, it's your day, right? But when they are doing all the things that we want them to do in our head, we're like, okay, good. I don't feel like getting onto you today, right? But we don't say it to them. And that happens with our marriages, with everything in life, is that we're not noticing we're noticing, but not
rewarding the positive behavior, the good
right.
thing. Yeah.
We're not validating it.
It's really interesting because my kids, I always act, I look at them like they're crazy sometimes because
Probably are.
well, no,
All kids are, right?
No, but so hear me out. This is really interesting. Constantly the same thing. Hey, whose trash is this? We just had Halloween. Who left the Skittles wrapper? What? This goes in the trash. What are we doing? Who squeezed toothpaste all in the kitchen, in the bathroom sink? Whose dirty clothes is this? Why is there a wet towel on the floor? Whatever the case is, constantly. I'm like constantly yelling their names. But then when they're doing the right thing, I don't always say something. But then when I want them to do the right thing, I'm like, hey, and they're like, well, if we clean our rooms, can we get a prize of some sort or whatever? I'm like, no. You're supposed to do that. I'm not going to reward you for the things you're supposed to be doing, but this is sort of the balance, right? Where it's like, I feel like there needs to be some level of validation for recognizing they've done the right thing,
right?
But not over rewarding for where their expectations are out of line with what they should be doing or whatever.
You don't want them to be entitled.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, that's what we've seen with that generation that came through where everybody got a trophy, right? There's no win or lose, which is part of life, right? You're not learning that work ethic. And I was just telling a client before I came over here that everything that has worth in life takes time, right? Your career, your financial stability, your family, your relationships, your friends, like it takes time. You're not going to just like instantly have this huge bond where you're going to, vent to your business partner, right? You're not going to do that with a stranger, right? Unless you're coming to a therapist. but it is that idea that when a baby comes out, I mean, yeah, the women have carried for 9 months. So there's some kind of, chemical bond there, but for the men especially, it's hard because it's like, I don't know you, dude, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just crying and pooping all over the place. Like stop doing that. Just go back to sleep. So we get this period of 3 months of like raising an infant, and then there's nothing else in life that we put ourselves through, sleep deprivation and money and exhaustion and like all that. But for a baby, we do. We want to keep it alive. And then we're bonded. And then because of that, it's really easy to get complacent even in our relationship with our kids as parents. And so everything in life, we've got to be in the present moment, right? The common theme that I'm seeing with all my clients right now through a pandemic is loneliness and fear, anxiety, right? If everybody's already kind of in a state of anxiety because the certainties that we used to love about life aren't really certainties anymore, that we are now already operating under a level of just kind of baseline of tense. So every little thing is going to cause us to want to snap, from dropping an ice cube on the floor to our kids, leaving a Lego that you step on, right? And so we've got to be really aware that we're already in a state of vulnerability. And that means we're more susceptible to higher reactions. What we talk about in therapy all the time is learn how to respond and not react. And that's the piece that if it were that easy, I wouldn't have a job probably,
Yeah. Well, on the topic of anxiety, if there's ever anything that I would go to a therapist for, I feel like it would be some level of anxiety that I feel from time to time with self-induced like stress because of some like artificial deadline I've set for myself or some artificial goal that I'm a super ambitious like person in general. So I have like these, particular goals or something we set in the business or this has to be done by this time. And there's a lot, and they're usually pretty ambitious goals. Right. And so I feel like this pressure to meet that.
Which you put on yourself, it sounds.
I put on myself and they're completely artificial. Like if I don't hit it, it doesn't fucking matter.
Well, it doesn't, but it does at the same time because you work well under pressure.
100% I do.
Right. And that, that's the thing.
I work the best under pressure and I'm the most calm under pressure.
Same.
I like freak out when I'm like open-ended stuff and, this can be done in 2 months from now. No, I need it to be done like in 2 hours and I'm going to crush it.
Right. And that's how you
And it drives everyone here crazy.
Right, yeah. Because nobody can keep up with that, right?
They're like, why didn't you tell us that a week ago? I'm like, I don't know. I just thought about it now.
Right.
But I want it done now.
Yeah. But that's what you found to help manage your anxiety. And what I've realized is when it comes to anxiety, it comes to two things, the spectrum of control, right? Some people really like control because when they're in control, they feel less anxious because it's that idea of you want something done right, do it yourself. The other end of the spectrum is I don't want control because I don't want that responsibility. If it's wrong, I want to blame it on the person that told me to do it.
Right.
Right. So, somebody take it. Right. Jesus, take the wheel. Right.
I don't point the finger at someone else later.
And so you've got to really look at how is it that you manage anxiety. And a lot of people manage anxiety pretty well. And it sounds like you do as well. And
I do. And now the anxiety doesn't come from the pressure of like the deadline necessarily. It comes from if there's things going on out of my control that hinder my like if I'm in control of it, no problem.
Right.
But if it's like I'm waiting on a guy to get this thing done to do this or whatever, like I don't know, whatever the thing is, it's out of my control because I'm waiting on an email back from someone that has the thing that I don't know.
Yep.
That's where I'm like, and the it's like shortness of breath, like can't breathe, like heavy chest. I carry it in my shoulders, my traps, like I'm like this all day long.
Right.
And it's insane. And then I get really, really calm and quiet. And it's all built up inside. And I know that feeling. And my wife knows that because there's been times even with the kids that like I've been in that type of situation trying to, whatever it is, something gets me to the point of like that snapping moment. And I've put hands through doors, walls, everything else. And that happened like 2 or 3 times. And I knew that myself, even from like a past girlfriend that was like a really bad situation at the end. And I learned that about myself. I'm like, I go really calm. And I'm like, that's like the calm before the storm. I'm like, do not fuck with me right now. This is going to get really ugly if it gets any further, you know? Right. And Brandy's learned that. The kids have kind of learned that because I've put some holes in some doors in our last house.
So
I don't do that anymore.
You've conditioned them to,
and they're like,
right.
Oh shit, he's gotten quiet. Like I'm just going to stop now. Whatever I'm doing, I'll leave that alone.
Right.
And it's really interesting. Now and I know that most of it's self-induced and I know how to avoid it if I wanted to, but there's still things that happen and they have to be like really big things. Like this is not a weekly thing. This is like twice a year, maybe, that I get to this holy shit moment.
Right. Well, and a lot of people backpack it. Right. And so I saw this video a while back and it kind of gave the example that like people are dump trucks, garbage trucks. And if you think of a garbage truck, it goes around all day, picks up trash, and then eventually when it gets full, it dumps. And as humans, we're kind of like garbage trucks. We're picking up trash through a day, a week, a month, a year. And then eventually when we're full, we got to dump. Sometimes we dump on our spouse. Sometimes we dump on the neighbor who lets their dog poop in your yard. We dump on the person who cuts us off in traffic. And
punch a hole in the door,
right.
Whatever.
And so that to me, having an emotional reaction, is warranted, right? But the biggest thing that I want to help people understand is that it's this kind of trifecta, right? You got your thoughts and the way that you're thinking, right? And if you're dwelling on stuff you've got to do tomorrow and goals that you want to hit, then that thought directly creates and manufactures emotion. So then now you've got this kind of fear, right? And that fear kind of gives you that adrenaline, right? That's why we call emotions feelings, because you feel it in your body, right? That's what, fear, adrenaline, sad, feel tired, happy, have more energy. And that gives you an urge to act, right? Most emotions are uncomfortable for a purpose. They're uncomfortable to get our attention and to incite us to action, to change. In all the time that I've worked with people, the thing that I realize is people do not want change unless it's uncomfortable. Right?
Interesting.
So we've got this uncomfortability that's created in us that we were born with. We have no say-so on emotions. I mean, anxiety falls under the umbrella of fear, right? Nobody had to teach you how to feel fear. Nobody had to teach you how to feel angry or happy. You just did. Now, the problem comes is that we always connect emotion and behavior, but they're two separate things. Right? We don't like to hang out with people who are angry because they're,
they're just negative. They drag you down.
They scream, they fight, they curse.
Right.
But I could be the most angry person in the whole world, and if you didn't see me yell, scream, fight, curse, you wouldn't know, and you really probably wouldn't even care. But we care because of the behaviors. So what it comes down to is if you can start to understand that the thought that you're having is creating an emotion, which then leads to the behavior. And if you want to cut that cycle, you have to start with paying attention to your thoughts. And not everybody's management of emotions is negative. I mean, some people manage life in ways that I wouldn't, but it works for them. Mental health is your health. We got physical health. Mental health, when it starts to interfere with our belief system, like we don't think anybody loves us or we can't trust anybody or we've gone through something traumatic, then yeah, that's the time to start to prioritize. We got our mental health, physical health, spiritual health. We need to pay attention to all of them across the board. And when it comes to anxiety, the best thing that I tell people to start with is mindfulness, learning to be in the present moment. And what's really cool, I was thinking about this morning, is that your product, the diaper bag, right, for men, which beautiful. And it's funny, I knew about you before I even knew you were local.
Oh, cool.
And then somebody was like, hey, he's local. And I'm like, even better. And then I opened this business and then I was like, oh, he's right here. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've kind of stalked you for a while, but it's really cool to me because a diaper bag is the epitome of mindfulness and living life in a way that you're working to be intentional to reduce anxiety, right? Because you're setting your future self up for success of what you put in that bag before you leave the house. I don't want to be anxious that I don't have enough wipes. That's the worst thing ever. Anybody that's changed a diaper or not enough wipes. Yeah, that's
or not having a diaper at all.
Right.
That's why I got the e-buck.
Yeah, that's
shameless plug.
Clothes are in the trash, not worth washing.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to me because, anything that we can do to set our future self up for success, right? Something as small as I'm going to set my clothes out in the morning because I hate feeling rushed.
Mm-hmm.
If we start our morning out feeling rushed,
it's literally the whole thing is getting dads in particular more involved from day one. So they create that bond sooner, right? You talked about 3 months where you're it helps you create that bond sooner where instead of being, I'm not changing that diaper, that's her job.
Right.
That's for her. It's like you give dad the right tool for the job and he's like, oh, I got this, get out of the way. So now he's changing diapers. He's even more vested into this child that he didn't birth.
Right.
They create that bond sooner, which means he's more involved in that child's life sooner, which means they prevent the societal issues of poor parenting. What was the word you said?
Ineffective
parenting.
Right.
We prevent that because dad was involved far sooner and is more vested in the whole thing. So it's it's setting yourself up for later.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to hear you say it in a different way, but it's exactly what's happening.
It is. But the one, I guess, tweak that I would make is that there's not a one size fits all to parenting, because the baby, when it comes out, it's going to have its own personality, and they don't.
Oh yeah, there's no instruction manual. There's no open to chapter 7.
Right.
This is how you deal with this.
Right.
It is not a one size fits all whatsoever.
And so we listen to our family, we read some books, but ultimately we've got to figure out what is the most effective for our household.
Mm-hmm.
And
based on your own core beliefs and things like that. There's a lot of
right. And if you never read a book in your life, read The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. I think a lot of parenting even comes down. Have you heard of that?
I have.
Yep. So a lot of it,
Someone
I believe,
else mentioned this to us, I think.
It comes down to, because I've had wives who tell me, you know, when their husband helps with the dishes, they're the most turned on that they've ever been, right? But then I have some women who they don't want to relinquish the control, right? They don't want their husbands to do more. They just want validation. They want their husband to come say, "You're a badass. You did great today." Right? Like you killed it as a mom. Like, hey, the house is clean and you're showered, right? Like, awesome job, right? Like,
you're crushing life.
Yeah. So we have to look at our spouse and say, like, how do they need to be loved? Not how do I want to love them? Because that good parenting thought is like, okay, to be a good parent, I've got to change this many diapers. I've got to get up this many times at night. But get away from those kind of like cookie cutter belief systems. The most important thing is that you're there, that you're keeping the child alive, giving it what it needs, and you're there for your partner.
Yeah. You
know, you're a team. You got to believe in that.
Let's break down the 5 love languages for a second for those people who are not familiar with that.
Cool. So the quick and dirty.
Yeah.
So you've got acts of service, doing something for someone to take a burden off of them. Quality time, spending some time with somebody that has emotional value. Gift giving, which is essentially the idea that I'm thinking about you when you're not here, right? Grocery store, see flowers, made me think of you. Here you go. Physical touch, which a lot of people in marriage jump to sex, but it's intimacy, you know, a back rub, a kiss when you walk in the door, snuggling on the couch. And then lastly, words of affirmation. So you look beautiful in that dress. Thank you so much for taking the trash out. Right? Yeah. The yard looks great, honey. Thanks for mowing it. Right. And so when you look at those 5 love languages, he really says it's 4 steps, right? You look at the first step, which is which one of those 5 make me feel most loved? Like which one just hits it, right? I like all 5, but I'd much rather some words of affirmation personally than a gift, right? So you got to look at that for yourself. The second step is how do you show love? Because most of the time, the way that somebody receives love is not the way they show love. Like even in gifts, so many people love to give gifts, but receiving a gift makes them uncomfortable.
Like whatever. Yeah.
Right. It's like,
or they just don't care.
Right.
Like,
but they want something else. They want the validation. Like, you were so thoughtful. That was the most incredible gift anybody has ever given me. Like, that's really what they want to hear. And so you've got to start to look past just what you think and really start to, and this is the thing I love about the book. It's not a bunch of psychological jargon. It's just to the point, gives you the words that you can use with your partner to.
Are you giving us the recipe to understand our wives?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Cool.
There's two things is this, the love language, because then you got to look at your partner and say, how does he or she receive love and how does he or she show love? And that's the piece where I see somebody not feeling loved, and I'm going to look at the camera for this, somebody not feeling loved in a marriage is not for lack of trying on the other person's part. It's most likely that what they're trying just isn't hitting the bullseye.
Yeah, they just missed the mark.
Yeah.
And that translates even to your kids and how, because it kind of comes down to just forms of communication is really what it is, right? You're breaking down. There's 5 forms of communication. It's being spoken to a certain way, being touched, some sort of affirmations, acts of service, whatever. Mm-hmm. And if you can understand even how your kids react to some of those things, because it may be that a pat on the back is better than a good job, Johnny. Like,
right.
That simple. Like, let's break it down. That simple. Like,
well, and NFL coaches have figured that out, right? They don't treat every athlete the same.
Right.
They can go smack somebody on the back of the head and yell at them and scream at them, and that makes that player work even harder. But then another player, they're going to have to be like, hey, you want to talk this through? Like, what could you have done better there? Right. Mm-hmm. So if that's true with professional athletes, the biggest of the baddest guys and men and women out there, then it's going to be true with our kids as well. And I say, have this conversation with your kids. Sit down and write it down. Like,
is there like a children's version of this?
There, so he has different adaptions to it. The 5 Love Languages is just like a purple cover. I think it's great if 2 people are going to read it in a relationship. But there's an adaptation for men that gives more examples that kind of stereotypical for men. There's one for teenagers. There's one for the workplace, because love and respect are kind of interchangeable. But it's really kind of breaking down that
Well, it helps a lot of leaders too. With managing a lot of different people and how to Sure, I get it.
Because if we're going to put energy into somebody, we want to get it right.
For sure.
And that's the problem is that when we don't get it right, then we're like,
well, yeah, it's like in a workplace too, for us. And it's like, some people are motivated by money. Some aren't. Some people want an experience. Someone else might rather have money. I want a raise. I don't care about a raise. I want time off. Whatever the case is, like there's just different things that motivate different people. And I think it's very similar to the love languages.
Yes. Yeah. And that same approach can be used with children and parenting. I talk about, so my belief is that a child should have to have a certain level at a certain age, right? And it's age appropriate, but have a certain level of responsibilities, chores, whatever you want to call them, that you're contributing to the house, right? That pays for your roof, your car payment, your bills, your clothes, your food, your vacations. You're contributing, right? End of story. But that does gain you your baseline privileges, maybe an hour of screen time a day, whatever that is. But there's also another list that's just a multitude of things, from cleaning fan blades to, cleaning behind the toilet, or the bottom part of a toilet nobody wants to clean.
Right.
And each one of those can hold a value. Right. And it could be money value. Some people are driven by money. And it seems to me older teenagers that drive love money.
Mm-hmm.
Younger teenagers, they want more time on their video games because that's their social. Especially during a pandemic, they can't hang out with people as much. So they talk to them on video games.
Right.
So you can use that to almost kind of be this bonus structure of like, if you do the behaviors that we were telling you we would appreciate you doing, we're going to honor and reward that work. Because the biggest thing with parenting, in my opinion, especially with 10 up, is reducing the power struggle. The less amount of times that you have to walk in and say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? I mean, even things to like, I had a family that did room checks on Sunday night, and they would never tell their kid to clean their room, but they were going to do a room check at 8 p.m. Sunday nights. And as long as it was clean, then they're good. If they want to live in filth the rest of the week, that was
on them.
That was on them.
Yeah.
And that's the thing where it's like, we try, I think, too hard sometimes to put in these certain morals and ethics in our kids, that we've got to let them learn naturally that they want it, not just because
forcing certain things. Right. Yeah, I get it. Social media. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to get to that in a second. I want to kind of back up to anxiety.
Social dilemma.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen it, so I'm curious to hear yours. Anyways, I want to back up to anxiety for a second, because I think there's different ways. You talked about us being dump trucks and dumping that, and that sort of like once you dump that load, you like dump that anxiety, you feel a lot better or whatever. Mm-hmm. So sometimes people it just sort of dissipates, or you just need a night out with the boys. You have a couple beers, and the next day you're like, I'm good now. Mm-hmm. Whatever. I don't care about that anymore. I'm good.
Right.
Other times you punch a hole in the wall, or you talk it out with someone. What about the people who don't do that? And I see this a lot. You get a lot of therapists just like prescribing stuff, a lot of medication, a lot of drugs, a lot of Xanax and this and that, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And it seems like it gets abused a bit. And I don't know if that's like an easy way out for some people, like, not saying you do that, but like some therapists, I imagine. Do you have the ability to give prescriptions like that?
So the breakdown is you've got licensed clinical therapists who do the most of the office space. So myself as a clinical social worker or a licensed professional counselor. Then there's clinical psychologists who can do office-based therapy, but primarily they do testing, ADHD testing, cognitive abilities, vision, all those kind of testing. And then you've got a psychiatrist who's an MD. They've actually gone to med school. They can prescribe meds. There are people out there who abuse Xanax, Klonopins, but the way I look at it is like, I'm not going to not have a glass of wine at dinner because there are alcoholics out there.
Right.
The medication is wonderful. It really is. Is it overused? Yes, because people want that. We're so impatient that we don't want to work for it.
Right. We want instant gratification.
Right.
I need something that's going to fix. I need the easy button.
Right. And the problem is, and even the research shows that the most effect you're going to get from therapy and medication at the same time. I look at medication as, if therapy hasn't worked, if you're still depressed after talking and dumping and learning and practicing skills, there's obviously a chemical piece that a medication is needed, right? So not all mental health can just be treated with talk therapy. There are medications that are, for diagnosis that are lifelong, aren't going to change. Medications are imperative. But I think that being in a room where you can talk to somebody and really dive in to get an education on yourself, and like I said earlier, learn how to be who you want to be, not who you were conditioned to be, that's the key, right?
What do you say about people who aren't even willing to face the truth about themselves or listen to themselves to answer some of those questions? Because I've come across plenty of people who go to therapists or psychiatrists and they get prescribed all kinds of shit and they're a fucking train wreck. And I'm like, how are they prescribed this? Like, who's prescribed? I'm like, and then they're off to some other one, and it's like, I quit seeing them. That person's crazy, or they think I'm crazy, and I'm like, you are crazy. Like, are you kidding me? So, anyways, my point being is, what about the people that it's like they can tell a therapist or a psychiatrist, I should say, what they want to tell them in order to get that prescription because they, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
of course.
How does that play out?
But I would say that
are you guys typically see through that bullshit? And you're like, I don't understand.
I mean, we do the best that we can, and I'll give credit to psychiatrists because there are people who are going to try to cheat the system across the board. It doesn't matter who you are. There's somebody out there who's going to try to cheat the system on something. And so, do I think that that's a majority of people who are prescribed meds? No. I would say there's more people who come into my office because they don't want to take meds. So it is kind of changing. I think primary care doctors, psychiatrists, when a new medication comes out, we don't really know what it's going to look like in 10 years. We just know it works. Xanax works. But the problem is it's very quickly possible to be dependent on it because Xanax gives you GABA. Our body already produces GABA, but when you're getting it artificially every single day, your body probably start producing it. Right. So
what does GABA do? What does Xanax do to the body?
So Xanax is giving you that chemical GABA, which when it hits the receptors, it's like,
just like chill pill.
Chill. Your body already does it. But when we live in 2020, it's not going to be enough GABA to make everybody just right. I don't know.
There ain't enough Xanax for 2020. But you hear him?
Well, I'm saying, yeah. So that's the thing that it's like, some people desperately do need it, highly, chronic kind of panic attacks. You can't even get through.
I know my wife has to take she'll take a half a Xanax. She'll have to go see a doctor she's terrified of flying, freak out, panic, flying, forget about it. So she'll take half a Xanax, on her way to the airport. And
it works.
And then she's like, okay, I'm cool.
Right. But ultimately the hope, and this is, I think, where some people fall into the addiction and dependency is that they're not understanding that medication like that oftentimes can be used as a stepping stone, right? The truth is you want to learn that you don't need to be that scared of the emotion, right? Even things like PTSD, people don't talk about these memories because the emotion that's attached to it is so powerful that they want to avoid it at all costs. And so sometimes they may need a Xanax to kind of get their defense level down a little bit so that they can actually talk and make progress in therapy.
Interesting.
And it's the hope that you can learn strategies to manage anxiety outside of medication. But it's not a quick process. It's different for everybody, and a lot of that mindfulness, I tell people, use your 5 senses, right? What can you see? What can you smell? What can you taste? What can you touch? What can you hear? And if you can do that, that grounds you. Anything that we can do to ground us into this present moment. So I tell people do 5, 3, 1. 5 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch. 5 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, 1 thing you can touch at any given moment. Now, you can do that really quickly, right? You name all 5 things I see, but then you want to go into a little bit more detail of describing it. right? So if I'm were to pick up this cup, right? Okay, this is a cup. It's got some darker gray with some stains on it. It's got a stainless steel top that's cool to the touch. It feels about half full. So when I'm doing that and I'm telling my brain what to think about, I actually am getting a mental vacation, because it's not thinking about what goal do I need to hit next, what numbers need to show up on my computer this morning, right? Because that you'll hit it when you get to work in the morning, right? Mm-hmm. But waking up having that thought, like we rob ourselves of joy. There's a lady that's amazing called Brene Brown. I don't know if you've seen her. She's got a Netflix special, but incredible gift at speaking. Like just when I was watching her, I'm just like, I want to memorize everything that she says. But she talks about that we rob ourselves of joy. And I think, and I remember even with my wife one time, like she comes out of my son's room and she's crying. I'm like, what's going on? She's like, he looks so cute when he's sleeping and he's going to grow up and he's going to, it's like, and I'm like, whoa. Let's just look at him. Let's just be cute. Let's soak up this joy moment. But we rob ourselves of that because we're jumping to something, right? I mean, I could sit here and tell you about my family dying in a horrific crash, and I could probably make myself cry right now. But what good is that going to do me?
Yeah.
Right. It's robbing me of joy. It's robbing me of the opportunity to be present with you and think about this and what we're doing and feel it and enjoy it. So that's the thing. And, and I'm about to put up on our, I haven't done much on our Facebook page, but I've created kind of this little quick quiz assessment for anxiety that I'm going to be putting up in the next couple of days, where people can take a quick quiz, kind of get an idea of where their range of anxiety, and some resources for them. If they want to get connected to therapy, they can. So, it's just really, my biggest thing is I just want people to understand that therapy doesn't have to be sitting in this room with this person who is way above you and knows everything. That it is a relationship, and it is something that you can find hope. I feel like as a therapist, I'm selling hope. I have to sell it in a way that people are willing to buy it, and they feel like they can afford it and put the energy into it.
It's super interesting. All of that stuff. Sorry, my phone's blowing up.
It's all good.
Like, on another level. Okay, social media. That was the anxiety, prescribing drugs. I think there's a lot of like antidepressants and things like that too that I feel like are just abused, and it's like there's the handful of people that I'm around from time to time that I see their life from the outside and it's in shambles. And to me, it's such an easy fix that I'm like, why, what are you doing? Like, why not do this or do that? I don't want to speak.
But would you say that to a person in a wheelchair? Like, dude, just get up. Stop being lazy.
Not in a wheelchair if they had a physical condition. But what you're saying is
right.
I understand.
If we treated mental health the way we did physical health, our world would look a lot different.
What about the people, let's say the person in the wheelchair just decided they didn't want to go to physical therapy, so their leg never got better, so they got in a wheelchair because they were just lazy about it.
It's their choice. They made their chair, and now they're sitting in it.
Yeah, but if it's ruining the lives of people around them, like someone's now having to push them around and do all these things because they were lazy, and they're pointing fingers at someone else that they can't get somewhere because you won't push me, essentially because I was lazy, but they're not willing to admit that for themselves. And they're just pointing their finger. It's everyone else's fault except for mine because...
Yeah. And that's a cognitive distortion that we talk about in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is blaming, right? It's like, I wouldn't have punched the hole in the wall if you didn't make me angry, right? People do that, right? People do all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah, there are going to be people out there who, because I look at pain and suffering in terms of pain is inevitable, right? Emotional pain, physical pain, spiritual pain. But suffering a lot of times is a choice, because, it's that story you hear of the girl who loses both arms, but learns how to drive with her feet, right? She could have just suffered. She could have just been miserable through that, but she chose not to. She chose to accept it and live life. And we have to have an equal balance of acceptance and change. If you don't accept that there are people out there in the world who are miserable and want to be miserable and are going to make other people around them miserable, we're going to be miserable. We have to understand that there are people out there that have, I like to look at it as everybody wears glasses, but the lenses on every single person's is slightly different.
I get that. What do you say to people who have loved ones who are dealing with that? I think there's a lot of times where you just have to disconnect yourself from those people.
Right.
That's hard to do.
And that's what comes down to the word acceptance. And I know I've thrown this out a few times, but acceptance is the most difficult thing that people struggle with because we're taught to really learn how to accept things that we like, we agree, that feel good, or within our morals and ethics. But true acceptance, and what we like to refer to as radical acceptance, is taking it for what it is, regardless if you can control it, regardless if you can't. It is what it is. So my family member who's an alcoholic and about to go into a homeless shelter, I have to accept that.
Even though you could do something about it potentially, or
well, that's where it comes
keep them
down
from going to a homeless shelter.
So here's the thing. It comes down to a problem or an obsession, right? A problem is something that I have an option to do something about, right? So if my daughter is an alcoholic and I'm just now finding out about it, of course I'm going to try all these things. It's a problem, right? It's a problem. Let's send her to rehab. Let's get her help. Let's find this. Let's do this. But if you're 5-10 years in with this daughter who is still an alcoholic, you've done what you can. You can't solve everything, right? You're not a miracle worker.
They have to want it for themselves.
Bingo.
Right.
It's like the joke. It's like, how many therapists does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know the answer.
Only one, but the light bulb has got to want to change.
It's funny.
So yeah, people have to want it. And sometimes when it comes
that's
to
the difficult realization for a lot of people to,
right.
Because you'll it's like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
And so that a lot of times plays out with things like addiction and things of that sort. But there are some mental health diagnoses. I mean, depression, people can't just snap out of depression. But if you don't know you have depression, it's like you can't fix what you don't know is broken. So that's why I say, talk about therapy. Talk about it in a way where it's not like you need to change for this life to be better for our family. You're bringing us all down, you Debbie Downer, right? Mm-hmm. It's just saying I was saying, talk to your kids, talk to them. You make mistakes. Hey, you're struggling. Let me validate. Like, I don't understand why you're so depressed. That's what you're thinking in your head. But dude, I get it. You're down. Like, what can we do about it? So you want to play golf? You want to do this? We can distract, but a lot of times we just get frustrated because we want everybody around us to kind of be happy. And life pushes this thought that life is only okay if you're happy. But happy comes from the root word happening, where you feel happy when something happens. It's fleeting. And so we have to understand and embrace that life is okay even when we're sad or depressed or anxious or jealous. It's life. It's just an emotion. It comes and it goes. It's the best part about emotions. They don't last.
Usually.
They do not last. We can manufacture them to stay longer than we want them to because of what we're thinking.
I feel like that's what my kids do when they get upset. Mm-hmm. And then I literally just wrote down distract and happy because I didn't want to forget to say this. So this is perfect. When my kids get upset about something like really stupid, and then and I'm like a minute and a half later, still crying about something stupid.
Right.
They don't even know why they're crying. They're just crying because they were still crying, and right. So then you have to distract. Like, I'll distract them and like be goofy or funny or something and make them laugh and sort of break out of distract them from that feeling to be happy, and then everything's fine again.
And so this is the dilemma with me in that, because my wife and I have even, with my almost 3-year-old, he'd fall down, scrape his knees, start crying. And just the parental adult instinct is to pick up a toddler and say, oh, it's okay, right? Or make silly faces, to get him to laugh, to take distraction away from the pain. It's like my dad used to say, oh, you stubbed your finger, let me stomp your toe. So you don't
forget about it, right?
So what we've been really trying to work on is not doing that, because there is a potential for an internalization of, they don't want me to cry. They don't want me to be sad. They don't want me to experience this emotion. So we're trying to get better at saying,
screwing up the whole time.
Right. Because you're saying like, okay, yeah, your knee's scraped, it's bleeding. I don't blame you for crying. Right. Like, I'm sorry, are you okay? Right. So,
and then just let it play out.
Just let it play out, because
that hurts my ears.
Well,
That screaming and crying from little girls loud.
Right.
No, but seriously.
Right.
So just is
Because
it kind of
to
go back
you,
to the
it
old
might
school?
be-
Is it the old school like walk it off, toughen up, or is that
no. It's validation. It's acknowledgement, right? Because if a kid comes home and got picked last for kickball and he comes to his dad and he's crying like, I got picked last, and his dad's like, don't be sad, be mad. Go push them and they'll pick you next, right? That confuses kids. And it's like, well, when I feel sad, I should really be mad, right? That's what we talk about, the difference between a primary emotion and a secondary emotion. Secondary emotion is an emotional reaction to an emotion. So it's the tip of the iceberg, right? It's that somebody made fun of me, my friends laughed, I'm embarrassed. I go push them and say, shut up, don't talk about me like that. And everybody else is like, ooh, he's mad. It's not really mad, it's embarrassment, shame. So shameful, I'm so embarrassed that I'm pissed about it because you did it to me, right? So we've got to really start to look at when our kid has an issue, when, like you said, crying about something stupid. But to your kid, to an 8, 9, 10-year-old, like, yeah,
whatever
what they
that is.
care. I mean, my kid loves to watch, what's that, Blippi on Netflix or whatever. It's like kids like things that adults don't like all the time. So yeah, but if we say that that's stupid, or we say that that's not valid, or that that isn't something that's of worth to cry about, then that can create confusion. Now, obviously this is relative on the situation,
Sure, of course. I get it.
So there are certain things you are going to be more, your moral and ethical code, values, those kind of things. But for the most part, and this is hard. I mean, I have to practice what I preach. I mean, I'm like,
Well, yeah, because it's like your first instinct is to do something. You're like, just stop this kid from crying,
right,
or whatever.
right. And that's where we have a moment. Every parent has a moment throughout parenting where it's, I can choose instant gratification or long-term benefit, right?
100%.
Kids in the grocery store starts throwing a fit. Everybody's looking at me. I'm really embarrassed. Do I give him candy because he asked for it? Okay, give him candy. Now the situation is down, right? Nobody's looking at me. Kid's happy. But now you've just trained your kid to cry for 10 minutes to get what he wants instead of it's not going to happen, right? So now 5 months down the road, you're at the grocery store, it's going to happen again.
It's like, it's just learned behavior. It's just bad. It's like we had a dog trainer on one time, and it's like a
Conditioning.
1-to-1 correlation. It's like you reward good behavior if you're about, you tell the dog to sit, it sits, you give him a treat. It learns that that's what that means. That, you know what I mean? They do this, you do another thing, they learn that that's bad. Up. It's so similar.
Yeah.
And then he says 90% of it is training the person, not the dog.
Right.
And it's you were saying that in the very, very beginning of this podcast is it's usually the parent you're trying to fix, not the child.
Right.
It's the parent who's created the problem in the child.
Right.
And it's only like children aren't born with this bad behavior. They've learned it along the way for some reason. So
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing. And to train an animal, we really have to train ourselves to be consistent, right? To do
which
something.
is very hard.
It is.
Because situations vary day to day. Like you said, you're in the grocery, something that you wouldn't normally let slide. No, you're not getting that. Now you're in the grocery store, temper tantrum, 30 people around. I got to shut this kid up.
Right.
Fine, whatever.
Right.
Now they know that.
Right.
Begging, screaming, crying,
And
kicking.
and the truth is, to be, not every single one of those moments is, you're not like
right. But if
killing
you do
your kids mentally. My wife and I always jokingly, but not really jokingly, say we're going to have a college fund and a therapy fund because we're going to mess something up. Yeah. So let's just be honest.
Yeah, but like if you continue to break those habits, or be inconsistent, I should say. If you continue to be inconsistent with what you're telling your kid and what you're actually doing, over time you can continue to do that. That's when you start running problems. One-off situations, like whatever.
But the conditioning is a real thing. I mean, there's a book called "Don't Shoot the Dog." It was great because it was a lady that was a dolphin trainer. She's talking about how do you get a dolphin to jump 30 feet in the air through a fiery hoop. And it's all conditioning, and you have to do it in the moment, right? Like a dog, you tell it to sit, and it sits, and then if you walk in and change the channel on the TV and then come back and give it a treat, you lost it, right? And that's where with kids, like even younger kids, because kids need, well, I think all humans, I think the ratio is like 6 positive things to every 1 negative thing, and So, what I really tried to work on even with my son was like, there'd be 20 toys on the floor, right? And we're trying to learn clean up. And if he'll go and clean up too, I'm just going to praise that, right? Oh, good job, bud. Like, yeah, because I want to condition him to want to do behaviors that he knows he's going to get, some kind of praise.
Positive.
Right. Because when kids don't get praise, and I see this a lot, is they will continue to do negative behaviors because they get more attention being in trouble than they do not. Right. You think of a kid that you put him in timeout and he runs away, and you go over there and you pick him up again. Yeah, he's getting picked up. He's getting touched. He's getting looked at.
He's getting talked to.
Whatever. Right. You're not doing something else. You're not on your phone. You're not cooking. You're not in the garage. So of course he's going to want that.
It's really interesting. I bet, and I have to think back to myself on this, that I'm more of a pointing out all the negative things because I have like very high expectations. I'm like a very perfectionist, and I look at everything as it could always be better, which is probably to a fault, of like, I can look at everything and be like, yeah, this looks great, but right? Right. I feel like I do that even with my kids. Like, yeah, your rooms are pretty cleaned up, but this is where you failed.
Right.
And I think it's important for them to know where they failed, but I probably didn't give enough positive praise for like the shitstorm that it was to like where it was like reasonably acceptable, but I want you to do better.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And you can even use the kind of business sandwich approach, right? Like, hey guys, you did such a great job on your room, but remember, if we're going to be putting our shoes up, they've got to be in the right spot over here. But overall, you did this really fast and really great.
Right.
It's like positive correction, positive.
Right.
So, because our kids need to know that they're not perfect. They need to know.
Right. That's how you learn, you improve, you get better.
Right. But a lot of it is just that understanding yourself, and because that perfectionist type of personality can be very successful, right? But it can also create anxiety in those around you, right? And I had a lady come in. She said that her mom was very meticulous about cleaning, and she would clean the bathroom and feel like she did great as a 10-year-old cleaning this bathroom, and her mom would say, "You left some specks of the paper towel right here in the window or in the mirror."
Whatever. Yeah.
And it just, to her, she internalizes as never good enough, right? That it's not, it's not about doing your best anymore. It's about you got to get it right or it's bad. And that's what you just have to be careful about. And it's all just awareness. We have to be aware of ourselves. None of us are perfect. We all have our own things. Some are more out in the open, like an alcoholic, and some are more in the darkness, like, pornography or something like that, right? But there's a big difference, but it's all comes down to ourselves. And we really just got to understand that we're human, give ourselves a little grace, know that we're doing the best that we can, stay away from that word should. I talk about this all the time. Laying in bed, I should have said this. I should have done this. If I did that, it would have worked better if I did.
So turn into like a regret?
It's shame. It's a judgment. Those shoulds are judgments on other people or judgments on ourselves. Me laying in bed tonight saying I should have said this on this podcast is saying that my present self should have known better, right? Should have known the direction of the conversation. Should have, how? Or how would I have known? I wasn't in the future yet. So it's just this tweaking it with changing the word should to I wish I said that. It's a lot lighter, right? Next time I will, right? So I'm a big stickler as a therapist in our dialogue, how we talk to ourselves. Because I used to struggle with, like, I would drop a pen and be like, oh, you're so stupid. Oh, you're an idiot. You're retarded. Like back when retarded was like the okay word to say. And I would say that stuff to myself all the time. And, well, let me correct. I saw the smile. Never okay, in my opinion. But, when you're a middle school kid, that was just like what everybody said.
Yeah.
And so I realized, like, I was just shaming myself and beating myself up all the time. And I was just feeling down. And I really had to be purposefully, mentally aware and present of that to stop it. Just bad habit.
Going back to the depression stuff and how that circles into social media, social dilemma. What are your feelings like? You and I have kids that are close to the same age. My daughter watches a lot of YouTube and stuff like that. So they see a lot of other kids. That sort of sets like an unrealistic expectation of what some people's lives might look like. They haven't experienced the Instagrams and all that stuff that a lot of these adults and teenagers look at and compare themselves to, etc. Like, and adults, not just kids and teenagers, but adults too, like grown ass people who are comparing themselves to other people and their lives not good enough. So most of social media is a highlight reel.
I say that often.
And I'm sure you've seen some effects of that mentally on people. I'd be curious to know a little bit more about what you've seen or what your thoughts are on that, as well as how it affects relationships and things of that nature.
Man, I could go on forever about it. So I'll kind of try to keep it concise enough. I think just like everything, I believe there's pros and cons, right? There's so many clients that I have that have been connected to some long lost family member, being able to stay in touch with these families. I mean, even for me, both sides of the grandparents live 8+ hours away, right? So social media is just an easy way. I don't have to spend every day like texting and remembering to send pictures to everybody. Like it's great, but that's why I love the title of that word, social dilemma, and that film that you're going to watch. You're not going to be surprised by any of it in the work that you do with marketing, but it's still a dilemma because I think we want it. We want technology to entertain us. We want technology to predict our moves, to pop up when we want it to pop up, and know where we're going and what time it's going to be to get there and what the weather is. Like, we want all of that, but then we get pissed that there's consequences, right? It's like, I love drinking alcohol, but I'm pissed that I got fired for going to work hungover, right? It's kind of a necessary evil. And to me, it's like, if you can't beat it, join it. In terms of join it, set boundaries for your household, right? Set boundaries for yourself. It becomes very OCD where we can't have a moment where nothing has happened without looking at a screen as adults. And our kids see this, right? There's really awesome research that was done a while back called this blank, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was this research that was done with a mother who just sat there with a blank face in front of a baby, and it would do everything it could to get his mother to act, to have an emotion, to have a reaction. And it caused the baby a lot of stress. Now, obviously they didn't do it for a long period of time to torment the baby, but just to show that blank face, right, not showing emotion and a connection to an infant is, kind of disturbing. If you think about it, when you look at a phone, what does your face do? Right? You just blank face. So kids seeing their parents on phones, they know they're disconnected, right? They're not seeing this emotion in their parents. And so it's really important to have some rules for your house on that. Talk to your kids. Again, I'm all about like age appropriate conversations with your kids. Like, talk to them. Like, there's a show on Netflix that did this little research study of teenagers, and they put teenagers in different rooms and let them watch this video of somebody playing a guitar. And then they had to post on social media what they thought about it. One group was told they were going to have to read it out loud in front of the girl, and the other group wasn't told that. And so the group that knew they were going to have to do it one-on-one, face-to-face, they were so much more positive. Like, hey, keep practicing, like maybe get some lessons, like that kind of thing. And the other group was like, you freaking suck. Don't put the guitar down, find a life, like just brutal.
Don't quit your day job.
Don't quit your day job. But, everybody gets to hide behind these screens, and the social, media world where you're scrolling through everybody's highlight reel, which I agree with that 100%. And you compare that to your mundane day-to-day life. I've seen things from, increased depression, loneliness, anxiety, that comparison of like, he just bought a car, man, I would love that car, but I can't even afford to pay my rent, to things like affairs. I mean, I see people like Facebook. I don't even know what the statistics are of like being the
number one cause of divorces or something like that.
And so it's just, if life sucks, it's so easy to go back to like, oh man, I wonder what Jenny's doing that I dated back in middle school, right? And oh, she's divorced. Cool. Let's talk.
And looking good.
All
And
right,
whatever.
you've been
yeah.
working out. You're a divorce body, right? You know, it's like everybody gets divorced, goes to CrossFit or something, and gets really
Gets
buff.
back in shape.
Yeah. But you know, it is a dilemma, and I think the biggest thing, it again comes down to boundaries. Talking to your kids, getting away from the parent of like, do it because I said so, right? Instead, saying, do it, and here's why. Right? Get off of social media, and here's why. Be careful with social media, and here's why. And if we don't explain, then it's still just that like fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we've seen through research is that fear-based behaviors, as soon as that person who creates the fear is gone, they're going to do what they want.
There's no boundaries at that point.
Right.
Yeah. It terrifies the shit out of me.
Me too. Middle school is, I mean, especially as a therapist, everybody's like trauma a lot of times comes from middle school. I work with a lot of middle schoolers, and just like the drugs and the sex and this, it's just, I'm petrified.
Yeah, man.
So I have to manage my own
feelings.
fear.
Yeah, it's crazy, you know, and I'm thankful too that, I mean, I feel like my kids are pretty good kids. I'm actually thankful to do what I do and be as active on social media as I am. For multiple reasons. One is we create a lot of content, and there's a lot of stuff that's just skit based.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my kids are involved with it, so they know it's not real. They know we're making it to post it, and it's fun, and it's a skit, and it's, you know, not real life.
Right.
So they see the behind the scenes of stuff. So I think in their mind, a lot of what they see on social media is pretend.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the luxury that they get being your children.
Right.
Right. Because, you know, you get to see the man behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
they also know that like, we have a huge social media followings. We've got, I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers across platforms. And they, like, most people that like their teachers know who I am. And like, they're like, my dad knows everybody, and everybody knows who you know, it's like, so I think they're aware of that for better or worse. I think it's good because they know I'm on these platforms in one way, shape, or form. They're not old enough to be on those platforms, but I think once they get to that age, they'll know that I'm going to be there too.
right.
And they can't hide from me, and that I'm going to see whatever they're doing.
Right.
So I think that'll keep them nice and honest and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Because you know the side of it that most people don't. Right?
Yeah.
You know all the data
Ins
that
and
you
outs,
get to see. And, you know, and I think that's, again, it comes down to the communication, right? Telling your kids, here's what's up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's how you can use it. Here's how you can.
I think they could greatly benefit from it at some point in time.
100%.
And my daughter, the only thing she wants in life right now is a phone. And I'm like, hell to the no.
It's hard. It's hard.
She's 9. She don't need no damn phone yet. You know, and I'm sure
Maybe
people
think when I was like 13 and wanted a pager, you know.
Right. You're dating yourself. Be careful.
Right, yeah.
But do you see that often? I mean, you're dealing with kids that young. You probably dealing with parents that have kids that young. That
So
like,
I'll tell you. So
I'm not for phones that age, and people listening might have done that, and they're like, it's fine. Or some people are. I just had a guest in here who was here recently did it. Jeff, single dad, sole custody of his daughter, sees the daughter very rarely, but she had a phone at 9 out of necessity of being able to communicate with the other parent or whatever the case is. And he's like, dude, don't do it. I'm like, I'm not, don't worry.
But, you know, and this is where it's tough. And this is where I think you have to know your kid. Right. And you know, because the same thing for my daughter, you know, we've been co-parenting since she was 2. Right. So she doesn't know any different. And even though we have a pretty good, you know, visitation schedule, it sucks not being able to see your kid, tell your kid goodnight, and having to go through your ex to say, let me say goodnight to my daughter. Right. And you have to do it up until a certain age. But then when it's like, okay, she's old enough that we gave her a phone that only had Wi-Fi. Right. So she could only use it in the house, only on Wi-Fi, only have, you know, it's restricted to certain things.
Parameters,
right? These parameters, you can only text grandma, grandpa, you know, those kind of things. And she's really good with it. And we'll say that you can't have it in your room at night. You know, as soon as your door closes for bedtime, it's out. We're just trying to start that early. So I'm not fighting it at 14. Oh my God. And so it's just those kind of things of saying, you know, This is what we're going to put into place. And I don't think every situation is cookie cutter. I mean, if you have a household where, grandma and grandpa live up the street and aunts and uncles are over here, and, kid doesn't really need a phone to talk to friends.
Nah.
But we also have to take into consideration we're moving into a world where everything's going to be a lot more technology based. I mean, so many businesses are getting rid of offices to do work from home, right? They save money. So this is going to be a world where they're going to have to use technology, as you're already seeing, for education way more than we ever want.
For all education and communication. I mean, that's just what it is.
Right.
And
that's where it's tough, because it's like you just spent 6 hours in front of a screen. Like, no, you're not going to have more screen time.
Yeah, go outside, play.
Right. But it's that balance of like, you got to know your kid.
Yeah, it's tough, man, because we're living through that transitional era of communication.
Right. And we have no idea what the future is going to look like.
And I'm sure these are a lot of the same concerns and fears that they had years ago when TV became such a big thing and kids were sitting in front of TVs and playing video games all night and that kind of stuff. Right. They were freaked out. Parents and now these kids
the eye of the devil. Right?
These kids that played video games their whole childhood are now making millions and millions of dollars as professional game players, and it's like a whole industry. Like you have no idea what the future's gonna have, and I don't want to be the one that's limiting that. Right. So it's like, yeah, you have to balance the
balance of moral and ethical values of the house and letting your kid be who they are.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've got lots of teenagers.
And let the kids decide too, right? So there's a lot of parents that push stuff on their kids.
Yes.
I want you to do this. I want you to play soccer. I want you to be a doctor. I want you to be a lawyer. I want you to do it because it makes me look better.
There you go.
Let the person do what they want to do.
And that can start early. I think parents wait too long to let their kids make decisions. And I mean, what we started to do is like when my daughter was 4, right? She wanted to pick out her clothes, but she's always wearing like a tutu and a sweater, right? And it's like, no, you're not going to wear that to church, right? Whatever it is. So we lay out 4 outfits on the bed, all appropriate for the event we're going to. And okay, which one do you want to choose, right? Letting her see that there are choices, but always within bounds, right? And I think it's just important to let kids be who they are. I mean, I've got so many teenagers that are like, I don't want to be a workaholic like my dad. I'm fine working at Jimmy John's and living in an apartment with 3 other guys.
For now. And that'll change.
Right.
Cool.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't sweat, like that parent who's, I don't know if I said that, I had a parent who was frustrated that his daughter only wanted to wear these 2 outfits in middle school. Is embarrassing. People are going to think you can't buy her clothes or that kind of thing. And I was like, let it go. Just wait. A while goes by. Now he's frustrated because he's buying, $100 dresses, and he's like, man, I wish I could go back to
2 outfits that she was happy with.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's all going to change. What you see is not always going to be the same.
Last note I have here, and we'll wrap it up after this, I think. Not that I want to start ending the podcast by any means, because this is super good stuff.
Well, I can always come back for more.
Yeah. Human trafficking. We talked to a gentleman, Craig Sawyer is his name. He heads up organization. He's like a retired Navy SEAL, badass guy. He's been there. He's done that. He's got an organization called Vets for Child Rescue, and their mission is to save children who have been involved in trafficking, and to like do sting operations. They take out, they take down bad guys, and they're putting these guys and locking them away. His daughter was kidnapped and raped, like throughout some of this. Like it happened to him and his daughter, and like
because he was doing this, or
not because just coincidence.
Oh wow!
Like his daughter was just like held up at knife point one night and like taken and raped for hours and hours and hours all night, and this guy had like killed a bunch of women before that, was like on a spree. And then she manipulated him to let her go. Like, I'll come back tomorrow, and did all this kind of stuff. Of course, she hauls ass and calls the cops, calls her dad. Her dad's like on it. Of course, they're freaking out because she'd been gone and missing all night. And, I can only imagine the thought of a guy like Craig, who's a Navy SEAL, who's been up against the baddest of the evilest people in the world, and can protect all this stuff, but like was not able to protect his daughter. I can't even imagine. But there's a lot of things in human trafficking that he brings up as commonalities, and one of them being self-esteem. Young girls with low self-esteem, and then they're being manipulated by people, and they're like, "Oh, you're so pretty," da da da, and then they build trust, and they're grooming these girls, and then they take them in, and then they start, whoring them out and selling them and doing all this stuff, and then they're a currency at that point. Have you had any experience with any of that kind of stuff? Do you have thoughts on that? Are you educated on any of that stuff, or just preventing low self-esteem for not just women but boys as well? And a lot of it, he said, stemmed from lack of fathers, moms who worked all the time. They were home alone. They got into trouble. They got into drugs. That created the self-esteem issues, yada, yada. They ended up homeless, and they had a bus stop and someone picked them up. Crazy stuff. But I just curious to hear your take on any of it, if anything.
I mean, to be totally transparent, I'm not going to claim to be any kind of expert in that field. I know enough to kind of be heartbroken about it. It's just to have a daughter, I just can't even fathom that, and to know, it's just, but ultimately I think it's, again, not a one size fits all on probably which women are chosen and which girls are chosen and those kind of things. It could be those situations where it's, poor upbringing, all this, but it can just be bad place, bad time.
For sure.
Right.
Situational.
Yeah. So, but I do think the real point there is that self-esteem, internal belief system about yourself. And I see this a lot of times, and what we refer to it as is more of a maladaptive belief system, meaning that when something occurred in your life, the way your brain at that age processed it, interpreted it, was not the most effective, right? It isn't beneficial. And so it's looking at, okay, how can we educate our daughters about what media is putting in their brain, right? Because I hate it for women the most, because it's like every movie, every magazine, everything is just the photoshopped, beautiful, actress who's worked out 6 days a week, and compare that to what you see in the mirror, and it's horrible. Eating disorders and image issues, and it's such a racket at what females often have to go through their head. And what it comes down to, and this is a whole nother thing, but this, what we call attachment theory, which is this, every single person from infancy has this need for attachment, for connection. And it's down to the basic cores of, like, you think of a baby in a crib and it cries, the mom or dad comes in, right? I cried for you, you came. And now if I cry for you again, will you come, right? Is there consistency? Can I depend on you? And that from an infant is what they're getting, is that attachment. But what happens is, as people age, if they don't learn effective ways of asking for what they want, need, they're just tend to push people away, right? So it's that kind of like, if somebody came in my office and was like, "Phillip, will you go get me a glass of water?" And I'm like, "Oh, let's wait. We're almost done." And they start screaming at me, "Go get me water now." Right. And I go get it and I give it to him. He got what he wanted, but how long am I going to see him for therapy because he yells at me like that? Right. So sometimes it goes down even in marriages, right? The stereotypical husband who works all the time comes home. The wife's like, "You don't care about us. You're always working. You missed dinner again. Like, just show some prioritizing of the family for once," right? You always, right? Those overgeneralizing. The core of that most of the time is, "Honey, please tell me that you love me and you want me to be here." You want to be here with your family. Like that's the core. But the way she goes about and trying to ask for it actually pushes him away. Now he wants to stay at work longer because he doesn't want to come home. Yeah, right. So it's what we call the pursuer and the withdrawer. And so you have to see that, like, are you accurately asking for what you want? And majority of the time they don't, because most people don't even know what they're asking for. So most people fight and don't even know what they really want out of it. Just fighting.
That's interesting too. work-life balance. I think that's a common thing. I mean, that's probably a huge thing. A lot of what you see, I imagine, is fighting with the core. At the core of what the issues are is like a work-life balance type of situation.
Yeah, and
I'm terrible with it.
And it increased. I would say
I'm like a freaking workaholic,
Oh,
like
yeah.
purebred workaholic.
right. And it works in some areas and it doesn't in others. But I would say through the stay-at-home order, through the pandemic, like coming out of this stay-at-home order, the amount of marriage therapy that I've been doing is increasing because people are at home with each other, right? I generally, prior to COVID, didn't see that until people retired. It's like you work your 9 to 5 or whatever
Forever,
right? And now you're home and you're like, oh, you're annoying. Right? Give me
You're gonna
some
spend
space,
all day with
right?
you. For me, it set a different expectation that I would be home all the time, and then I had to go back to work, and it's like, what the hell? Why are you at work? Like, you used to be home all the time. Like, yeah, well, there was a pandemic going on, and I still have a business to operate here.
Right.
I mean, not that I was a complete asshole like that, but
Yeah, no. But I mean, that's
the reality. It's like it set a different expectation that I'd be home all the time. Now, all of a sudden, I was like, I can't get anything done around here.
Right.
It's crazy.
And that's the ripple effect. We're going to see,
wild.
even to the point where I was talking to another therapist about the studies now having to be done on the fear of speech impediments in children, because even in daycare, masks.
Oh,
Teachers are wearing masks. They don't get to
see.
how the mouth is moving for words. I remember with my son, it was like he would watch me and be like,
Oh yeah,
dad, like following that. And now,
yeah. Well, I have to do it even with my youngest daughter. From time to time, will pronounce something wrong. Usually something with like a TH and an F. I'm trying to think of something like a good example might be like bathroom.
right.
It's like no bath. Like the bathroom, and they're like bathroom. And I'm like, no, the, and they have to see it. Otherwise, they sound bathroom and bathroom, bathroom. Like they sound exactly the same to someone who doesn't know better.
Right.
So, yeah, I can imagine by not seeing the mouth because of masks, what kind of holy shit.
Right.
That's crazy.
And that's the stuff that, we're at a space now where what we're going to see in the future for every profession is going to be different. And everybody keeps saying, like, I just can't wait till we can get back.
I don't think it's going to go back to
I'm
normal.
like, no,
not the way we knew it.
Nope.
It'll never go back to the way we knew.
No, we're going to have to figure out
Some variation, but it ain't going to be the same.
We got to figure out our new normal. And a lot of aspects of that is going to be uncomfortable, and a lot is going to be great. And understanding that if you're living in the past and you just want to get back to where you used to be, you're going to be waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be suffering, in my opinion, for no reason. So it's just acceptance, right? This is here. I hate the mask. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. Everybody feels robbed of something. Weddings, grandkids, this, trips. I mean, my parents were supposed to go to Israel. Last time they planned to go to Israel, Hurricane Katrina happened when we lived in New Orleans. So, 5 feet of water in our house. So my mom's like, I'm never planning a trip to Israel again because every time I do, something horrible happens.
Yeah. So it's her fault.
Yeah, it's her fault. Right.
Got it.
But yeah, there you go, Mom. But it's that kind of thing. Everybody's feeling robbed of something. Everybody's just upset. But there's so many silver linings. There's so many businesses that are doing better than ever. There's so many families who are getting to spend more time together. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the stay-at-home going out and on a bike ride with the family, and like, my wife and I just looked at it and we're like, these kids are never going to forget bike rides on a Tuesday afternoon with their mom and dad.
Yeah, for no good reason. Like,
right. Yeah. But to us, we're like, dang it.
Yeah, we're all moody about it.
Right. So just, everything's pros and cons. That's kind of the way I try to look at things.
For sure. Cool. Awesome. Dude, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, man.
Where can people find you?
So we are, location wise, we're in, technically Hilton Head, South Carolina, in Moss Creek Village, right before you go over the bridge to the island. Website, www.therapygrp, that's G as in girl, R as in Richard, P as in Paul.com. Facebook, www.facebook.com/therapygrp.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Cool. Yeah. And like I said, we're about to put that anxiety quiz up. So if you're curious,
That's gonna be on the website.
Yeah, it's going to be on my Facebook. It's going to be on the Facebook. Put a post up I don't know when this is going up, but I have a post there. If you're curious about your anxiety and want to take a quick little quiz to see where you are, hit us up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Dude, thank you
Appreciate
so
it,
much.
brother.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Guys,
man.
thanks for listening. Make sure you leave all your comments, likes, ratings, reviews, all the things. We'd really, really appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next episode. Peace.